At my husband's funeral, I heard my daughter-in-law say, "Speed up the inheritance. I'm putting the old lady in a nursing home." She had no idea my husband had added a clause about her in the will before he passed. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that at 72 years old, I would find myself shrinking into the shadows to avoid my own family. The day I buried George, my husband of 47 years, was the day I discovered how little I was valued by those who should have cherished me most. The funeral service had been beautiful, if such a word can be applied to something so somber. St. Andrew's Church was filled with friends, colleagues, and family members. George had been deeply respected in our community, a kind, thoughtful man who'd spent his career as a high school principal. He'd touched many lives. I had held myself together throughout the ceremony, accepting condolences with quiet dignity. My hand clutched tightly by our son, Thomas. He'd been attentive all day, making sure I ate something, guiding me gently through the crowd. His wife Karen had been there too, of course, elegant in black, her expression appropriately solemn. After 2 hours of handshakes and embraces, the weight of grief pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I needed a moment alone. The funeral home had a small side room, a place for families to gather privately. It was empty now, everyone having moved to the reception area. I slipped away, telling no one, desperate for just 5 minutes of silence. I sank into an armchair in the corner, closed my eyes, and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. George was gone. My partner, my confidant, my anchor. 47 years together, and now I was alone. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard the door open. Quickly I wiped my eyes, not wanting to be caught in such a vulnerable state. But the newcomers didn't notice me in my corner, partially hidden by a large flower arrangement. "I told you we should have brought this up before he died." Karen's voice stripped of the sympathetic tone she'd maintained all day. "It wasn't the right time," Thomas replied, sounding tired. He was suffering enough. I froze, not meaning to. Eavesdropped, but suddenly unable to announce my presence. "Well, now we have to deal with her," Karen continued, her voice sharp with irritation. "You need to talk to the lawyer first thing Monday. We need to know exactly what we're getting and how." "Quickly, Karen, please. My father isn't even in the ground yet, and your mother isn't getting any younger. The longer we wait, the more complicated things will get." There was a rustle of fabric, Karen adjusting her dress perhaps. Artila, my Portuguese, was rusty, a language I'd learned decades ago when George and I had spent 3 years teaching in Mexico, but I understood enough. "Hurry up with the inheritance. I'm sending the old woman to a nursing home. The old woman." Me, Thomas, sighed heavily. "She's not going to want to leave the house." "Of course not, but she can't manage alone, and you know it. The place is too big. There are stairs, and she's already getting forgetful." "It's the sensible solution." "Maybe she could live with us," Thomas suggested, his tone uncertain. Karen's laugh was cold. "In our house with my schedule. Besides, you know how she is always in everyone's business. I can't have her there judging everything I do. She's my mother, Karen, and you're my husband. This is our life, our future. The money from selling that house could make a real difference for us." A pause for the kids' college funds. I sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. George had been gone less than a week. We hadn't even had the reading of the will yet, and already they were dividing up our lives, making decisions about my future without me. "We'll talk about this later," Thomas said firmly. "Today is about respecting my father." "Fine, but don't put this off too long. The real estate market is hot right now." They left the door, closing softly behind them. I remained frozen in place, their words echoing in my head. The old woman, the house, the nursing home. When I finally managed to stand, my legs trembled beneath me. I caught sight of myself in a mirror on the wall. pale-aged, diminished by grief. Was this how they saw me? A burden to be managed, an obstacle to their inheritance? As I stumbled back to the reception, one thought kept repeating in my mind. George had said something to me just days before he passed. We'd been discussing finances and he'd squeezed my hand. His eyes serious, despite his weakness. Margaret, I've taken care of everything he'd said. Don't worry about the future. I've made sure you'll be protected. At the time, I'd thought he was just trying to comfort me. Now I wondered if he had somehow known what was coming. The house felt different when I returned from the funeral. Emptier, colder. George and I had lived in this modest two-story colonial for nearly 32 years. We'd raised Thomas here, celebrated holidays, weathered storms, both literal and figurative. Now, its familiar walls seemed to echo with absence. I wandered from room to room that evening, touching George's things, the reading glasses he'd left on his nightstand, the cardigan still hanging on the hook by the door, the half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. Small pieces of a life suddenly interrupted. I couldn't bring myself to move any of them. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Karen's words kept replaying in my mind like a cruel taunt. Mandar Aya Prosilo, send the old woman to a nursing home. I'd spent my entire adult life as a kindergarten teacher, nurturing other people's children. I'd raised my own son with all the love and patience I could muster. Was this all it had amounted to, being discarded when I was no longer useful? The following morning brought a cheerful knock at my door. Karen stood on my porch, a bright smile plastered on her face, holding a casserole dish. Margaret, I brought you some chicken pot pie. I know how hard it can be to cook for just one person. I forced a smile and invited her in, wondering if she had any idea I'd overheard her plans. Had she always been this transparent, or was I only seeing it now? Thank you, Karen. That's very thoughtful. She swept into my kitchen, setting down the dish and immediately opening cabinets as if she owned the place. Let me help you organize a bit. This kitchen is just so. She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. Cluttered. I watched as she began rearranging my spice rack without permission. My spice rack, which George had built for me as an anniversary gift. 17 years ago, with each shelf carefully measured to fit the space beside our stove. I've managed just fine with my kitchen for 32 years, I said more sharply than I intended. Karen turned surprise flickering across her face before her sympathetic mask slid back into place. Of course you have. I just thought I'd help make things easier now. Then she trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the empty chair where George used to sit. Now that I'm alone and apparently incapable, the words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes widened slightly. Margaret, no one thinks you're incapable. We're just concerned about you managing this big house all by yourself. It's not that big. 2 bedrooms and a study, a boiler that's always giving trouble, and the yard work. I sipped my tea, saying nothing. George and I had discussed downsizing years ago and decided against it. We loved our home, our neighborhood, the garden we'd cultivated together. The water heater worked perfectly fine with regular maintenance, and I had a service for the heavier yard work. Thomas and I have been talking. Karen continued, her voice gentle but firm. We think it might be time to consider some options that would be more manageable for you. Options senior living communities. There's a lovely one just 20 minutes from our house. Private apartments but with staff available. Meals provided. Activities. She was already pulling brochures from her purse. Had she brought them to the funeral too? I'm not ready to leave my home, Karen. I kept my voice steady, though my hands wanted to tremble. No one's saying right this minute, she backpedaled. But it's good to start thinking about it. Planning ahead. Planning ahead. The funeral was barely over. I found something interesting yesterday, I said, changing the subject. Going through George's desk calendar, he had several appointments with Mr. Harris in the weeks before he passed. Mr. Harris was our lawyer, had been for decades. Karen's smile faltered for just a moment. Oh yes, I wonder what they were discussing. Probably just updating his will? Standard procedure when someone is. She waved her hand again, unwilling to say dying. Probably, I agreed mildly. When is the reading scheduled? Thomas has been handling that. I think it's next week. She stood abruptly. I should get going. I have a charity luncheon at noon. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the brochures she'd left behind. Smiling seniors playing golf, eating in elegant dining rooms, attending art classes. None of it looked terrible exactly, but it wasn't my home. I thought again of George's words. I've taken care of everything. Had he suspected what might happen after he was gone? Had he known his son and daughter-in-law better than I did? That afternoon, I called George's doctor, Dr. Miller, who had been both his physician and our friend for many years. Margaret, how are you holding up? His voice was warm with genuine concern. I'm managing, I said. Actually, I'm calling about something specific. Those last few weeks, did George ever talk to you about me? About his concerns for what would happen after? There was a pause. He did. Yes. What did he say? He asked me to keep an eye on you, Dr. Miller said carefully. And to be available if you needed a medical opinion about anything. A medical opinion? About what? Another pause. About your capacity to live independently. He was concerned that there might be pressure for you to leave your home before it was medically necessary. My throat tightened. I see. Margaret, are you experiencing such pressure? It's been suggested that I might be better off in a senior living community already. His tone sharpened. That seems premature. You're in excellent health for a woman of 72. Your last physical showed no cognitive concerns. Your mobility is good. There's no medical reason you can't continue living independently. Relief washed over me. Would you be willing to put that in writing? Absolutely. George asked me to prepare such a letter. Actually, I have it ready. He thought you might need it. George, even in his final days, he'd been thinking ahead, anticipating the challenges I might face. Tears pricked at my eyes, but for the first time since his death, they weren't entirely sorrowful. There was gratitude there too, and something else. Resolve. I wasn't going to be pushed aside so easily. The next morning, I noticed Karen's car pulling into my driveway again. This time, she wasn't alone. Thomas was with her, and they both wore expressions of determined cheerfulness that immediately put me on guard. The battle for my home, my independence, my dignity had begun. I didn't sleep well that night, my mind racing with worries about what Karen and Thomas might be planning. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to be proactive rather than reactive. George had always told me that preparation was half the battle. When Thomas and Karen arrived at my door, I welcomed them with coffee already brewed and a calm smile that belied my inner turmoil. Mom, we wanted to talk to you about some practical matters. Thomas began settling onto the sofa where his father used to sit. The sight of him there so different from George, yet occupying his space, made my heart ache. Of course, I said, passing him a cup of coffee. I've been thinking about practical matters too. Karen perched on the edge of her chair, her posture perfect as always. We've been researching some wonderful living communities, she said, pulling out more glossy brochures. This one has a waiting list, so it's good to get on it early. I nodded, appearing to consider the brochures. Before we talk about that, I'd like to ask Nancy to join us. Karen's eyebrows rose. Nancy, the nurse who helped with Dad. Yes, she's stopping by this morning. I glanced at my watch. She should be here any minute. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Nancy Clark had been George's home health nurse during his last months. In her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, she'd become something of a friend. "Sorry I'm late," she said, stepping into the living room. Traffic was terrible. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Margaret, we were hoping to have a family discussion." "Nancy was practically family these last few months," I replied, "and she has professional experience that might be helpful." Nancy sat beside me, her presence bolstering my courage. She'd witnessed Karen's thinly veiled impatience during George's illness, her reluctance to help with his care. "Thomas Karen," I began, "I appreciate your concern about my living situation, but I've given it a lot of thought, and I've decided to stay in my home." Karen's smile tightened. "Margaret, we understand that emotionally this house means a lot to you. But practically speaking, I interrupted gently. I'm perfectly capable of living independently. I've spoken with Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, who agrees there's no medical reason I should leave my home." Thomas frowned. "You spoke with Dad's doctor about this?" "George asked him to assess my capacity before he passed." I explained. "He's provided a written statement." I pulled out the letter Dr. Miller had delivered yesterday, passing it to Thomas. His eyes widened as he read it. "This says you're in excellent health for your age," he said, sounding surprised. Had he already convinced himself I was frail? "I also spoke with Mrs. Thompson from the hospital's social services department," Nancy added. "She can set up an assessment to determine what supports Margaret might need to stay home safely." Karen shifted uncomfortably. "That seems premature. We're just exploring options." "Actually," I said, "it seems like you've already decided I should move to an assisted living facility. Send the old woman to a nursing home," were your exact words, I believe." The room went silent. Karen paled, then flushed. "I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard you at the funeral, Karen," I said quietly. In the side room, I was there sitting in the corner. Thomas's face fell. "Mom, I don't blame you for thinking about the future." I continued, "But I'm not ready to leave my home, and there's no legitimate reason I should. Nancy has helped me develop a plan to age in place safely." Nancy nodded. "Simple modifications like grab bars in the bathroom, a medical alert system, and regular check-ins can address most safety concerns. I'd be happy to review the plan with you both." Karen stood abruptly. "This feels like an ambush." "It's not meant to be," I assured her. "I'm just being practical as you suggested." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Olivia, my 17-year-old granddaughter, letting herself in with the key she'd always had. "Hi, Grandma," she called, then stopped short, seeing everyone gathered. "Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting?" "Not at all, sweetheart," I said. "We're just having a family discussion." Olivia, tall and thoughtful like her grandfather, glanced around the tense room. "Is everything okay?" "We're discussing Grandma's living situation," Thomas explained. Olivia frowned. "What about it? Your parents think I might be better off in a senior living community." I explained gently. "What?" "Why?" Olivia looked genuinely shocked. "Grandma's fine on her own. She literally taught me how to make lasagna from scratch last weekend." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Olivia, adult decisions are more complicated than that." "I'm not a child, Mom," Olivia replied. "And Grandma's not incapable just because she's 72. I felt a rush of affection for my granddaughter, so fiercely protective. She'd been coming over more frequently since George passed. Sometimes doing homework at the kitchen table, sometimes just sitting with me in comfortable silence. "Olivia, why don't you help me bring in some cookies from the kitchen?" Nancy suggested, giving the family a moment. When they left, Thomas sighed heavily. "Mom, I just want what's best for you." "I know you do," I said, reaching for his hand. "But what's best for me right now is staying in my home with appropriate supports." George and I discussed this before he passed. This was our decision. Thomas looked torn, glancing between me and Karen. The reading of the will is tomorrow, I reminded him. Let's wait and see what George wanted before making any major decisions about the house or my living situation. Karen stood smoothing her skirt. We should go. I have a hair appointment. After they left, Nancy stayed for another cup of coffee. That went about as well as could be expected, she observed. Thank you for coming, I said. It helped having you here. Olivia returned from seeing her parents out. Grandma, are they really trying to make you move out? I sighed. They're concerned in their way. They're being ridiculous, Olivia declared. Don't worry, I won't let them push you around. Looking at her determined young face, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't entirely alone in this battle. The offices of Harris and Cole attorneys looked exactly as they had 6 years ago when George and I had last updated our wills. The same leather chairs, the same landscape paintings, even the same receptionist with her kind smile and graying hair. Mrs. Johnson, it's good to see you again, she said, rising to greet me, though I wish it were under different circumstances. Thank you, Linda, I replied, clutching my handbag a little tighter than necessary. Is everyone here already, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson just arrived. Mr. Harris will be with you shortly. I nodded and settled into one of the waiting room chairs, my heart pounding unnaturally fast. I barely slept last night wondering what George had arranged in his final meetings with the lawyer. Thomas and Karen sat across from me, Thomas flipping through a magazine without really seeing it, Karen checking her watch every few minutes. How long is this going to take? She whispered to Thomas. I have that charity board meeting at 2. Thomas shushed her, glancing apologetically in my direction. Mr. Harris appeared in the doorway, dignified in his gray suit, his silver hair neatly combed. Mrs. Johnson? Thomas. Karen, please come in. We followed him into his office, taking seats around a polished conference table. Mr. Harris settled at the head, a thick folder open before him. Before we begin, he said, I want to express my condolences, Margaret. George was a good man and a dear friend. Thank you, I murmured. Now to business. He adjusted his glasses. George's will is fairly straightforward. Margaret as his surviving spouse. You inherit the house outright and all its contents. The joint bank accounts, of course, were already in both your names. There's the life insurance policy, which names you as beneficiary. Karen shifted in her seat. And the investment accounts. Mr. Harris glanced at her, his expression neutral. I'm getting to that, Mrs. Johnson. George had a retirement account worth approximately $500,000. Upon his death, Margaret is the primary beneficiary. Thomas nodded, looking unsurprised. There is, however, a codicil that George added 3 months ago. Mr. Harris continued turning a page in the document. It concerns the house specifically. I felt a flutter of anticipation. This must be what George had been planning. The house at 782 Oakwood Drive is bequeathed to Margaret Johnson with lifetime right of residence. Upon her death, or should she voluntarily choose to sell the property, it will pass to Thomas Johnson. Karen leaned forward slightly, her interest piqued. However, Mr. Harris emphasized the word, there is a condition. If Margaret is forced or pressured to leave her home against her wishes, or without the documented recommendation of at least 2 independent medical professionals that she requires care she cannot receive at home, the house will not pass to Thomas Johnson. Instead, it will be sold, and the proceeds will be donated to the Alzheimer's Research Foundation in memory of George's mother. The room went silent. I stared at Mr. Harris, hardly daring to believe what I'd just heard. George had created a legal safeguard to protect me from exactly what Karen had been planning. Thomas's face registered shock, then confusion. I don't understand. Why would Dad think Mom would be forced to leave her home? Mr. Harris's expression remained carefully neutral. I cannot speak to his motivations, only to the legal provisions he established. Karen's face had drained of color. She gripped the armrests of her chair, knuckles white. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice tight. No one is forcing Margaret to do anything. I'm simply conveying the terms of the will, Mr. Harris replied calmly. There are additional provisions. George established a trust to pay for home maintenance, property taxes, and in-home care services should Margaret require them in the future. He thought of everything I whispered, a wave of gratitude washing over me. There's more, Mr. Harris continued. George left a personal letter for each of you. He handed me an envelope with my name written in George's familiar handwriting, then passed one to Thomas. There's nothing for me, Karen asked, unable to hide her indignation. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Johnson. Thomas stared at his envelope, making no move to open it. I slipped mine into my purse, wanting to read George's words in private. Are there any questions about the will itself? Mr. Harris asked. Thomas cleared his throat. Can the condition about the house be contested? Karen shot him a warning look. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris folded his hands. You can contest any will, Thomas, but I must tell you that George was of sound mind when he made these amendments. He underwent a cognitive assessment specifically to prevent any such challenge. Additionally, we videotaped the signing session, which is standard practice in our firm when significant changes are made. I see Thomas said quietly. If there are no further questions, I'll have Linda provide you with copies of all the documents. Outside the lawyer's office, Karen didn't even try to hide her anger. This is absurd, she hissed to Thomas. Your father specifically targeted me with that clause. Karen, not now, Thomas muttered, glancing at me. I need to get home, I said, not wanting to prolong this uncomfortable moment. Olivia is coming over after school to help me sort through some of George's clothes for donation. I'll drive you, Thomas offered. That's all right. I drove myself. I'd been driving for 52 years without incident, though Karen had recently begun suggesting it might be time to reconsider my driving privileges. Mom, we need to talk about this, Thomas said, his expression troubled. Yes, we do, I agreed, but not today. Today, I need to process what we've learned. As I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel, despite my emotional turmoil, I thought about the envelope in my purse. What final words had George left for me? At home, I made a cup of tea and sat in my bedroom, carefully opening the envelope. My darling Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're facing the challenges I feared. I've seen how Karen looks at our house, how she talks about next steps when she thinks I'm not listening. I know our son. He's a good man, but easily influenced by her ambitions. I'm sorry I won't be there to stand beside you, but I've done what I can to protect you. The house is yours for as long as you want it. The money is there to maintain it and care for you. Don't let them rush you into decisions that aren't right for you. Remember what we always told each other. We may bend, but we don't break. You're stronger than you know, Margaret. I've seen that strength every day for 47 years. All my love, now and always, George. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I held the letter to my heart. Even from beyond, George was protecting me, fighting for me. When the doorbell rang an hour later, I had composed myself. It was Olivia, backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression unusually serious. Grandma, we need to talk, she said, stepping inside. Mom and Dad are fighting about the will. Dad let something slip about. A nursing home. What's really going on? I ushered Olivia into the kitchen, my mind racing. How much should I tell my 17-year-old granddaughter about the tension between her parents and me? She was perceptive. Too perceptive sometimes. But she was still young. Would you like some lemonade? I asked, buying myself time. Grandma, Olivia said, dropping her backpack on a chair. Please don't treat me like a kid. Something's wrong and I want to know what. I sighed, pouring us both glasses of lemonade. Your mother thinks I should move to an assisted living facility. Olivia's eyes widened. But why, you're perfectly fine here. She believes the house is too much for me to manage alone. That's ridiculous. Olivia scoffed. This house isn't even that big. I smiled sadly. I think there are other considerations involved, like what I hesitated not wanting to speak ill of Karen to her daughter. Financial ones, perhaps. Olivia's face darkened with understanding. The house. They want to sell it, don't they? I nodded slightly. Your grandfather anticipated this might happen. He put a clause in his will to prevent me from being forced out. Good for Grandpa, Olivia said fiercely. Then her expression shifted to worry. But Mom won't give up easily. I've seen how she gets when she wants something. That was an understatement. Karen had always been determined, calculating. It was partly what had made her successful in her career as a real estate agent. She saw opportunities where others didn't, and she pursued them relentlessly. I can handle your mother, I assured Olivia with more confidence than I felt. Olivia took a long sip of lemonade, her brow furrowed in thought. You know, she said finally, I could move in with you. I nearly choked on my drink. What? Just hear me out. I'm going to Midwest State University next year. It's only 20 minutes away. I could live here instead of the dorms. I'd help with the house, and Mom couldn't argue that you're all alone. I was touched by her offer but shook my head. Olivia, that's very sweet. But your first year of college should be about making friends, having the full experience. I'd still have all that she insisted. But I'd have free housing, and you'd have company. It's practical. Practical, Karen's favorite word. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Karen's voice called out. Olivia, are you here? Olivia rolled her eyes. In the kitchen, Mom. Karen appeared in the doorway, her professional smile firmly in place, despite the tension I could see in her shoulders. There you are. I thought you were helping Grandma sort through George's clothes. We were just about to. Olivia said, her tone suddenly defensive. Karen glanced between us, clearly suspicious. What were you two discussing so intently? College plans, I said smoothly. Olivia was telling me about the programs at Midwest State University. Karen nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. Olivia, can you give Grandma and me a few minutes? There's something we need to discuss. Olivia crossed her arms. If it's about Grandma, I think I should stay. Olivia. Karen said, her voice sharpening. This is an adult conversation. I'm not a child, Mom. I placed a hand on Olivia's arm. It's all right, sweetheart. Why don't you start looking through the closet upstairs? I'll join you in a bit. Olivia hesitated, then grudgingly picked up her backpack. Fine, but I'm not going far. She gave her mother a pointed look before heading upstairs. When we were alone, Karen sat across from me, her smile fading. Margaret, we need to talk about what happened at the lawyer's office. I thought we agreed to discuss it another day. This can't wait, Karen insisted. That clause George added, it's manipulative and unfair. I raised an eyebrow. Unfair? How so? It's clearly designed to prevent us from helping you make necessary decisions about your future, or designed to prevent you from making those decisions for me, I countered gently. Karen's eyes narrowed. You think I'm the villain here, don't you? That I'm just after the house. I think you have strong opinions about what should happen to me in this property, I said carefully. Opinions you expressed quite clearly at the funeral. Her cheeks flushed. I was emotional that day. We all were. Yes, grief often reveals our true thoughts. Karen leaned forward, her voice dropping. Margaret, be reasonable. This house is worth at least $3,000 in today's market. That money could do so much for Thomas and Olivia's future. Instead, it's just sitting here underutilized. This is my home, Karen, not an investment property. And it could be someone else's home, a young family who needs the space. Meanwhile, you could be in a beautiful apartment with people your own age, activities, dining options, all the things you think a woman of 72 should want, I said quietly. She sighed in exasperation. I'm trying to be practical. So am I. That's why I've asked a home modification specialist to assess what changes might make aging in place safer for me. Karen's eyes widened. What? Nancy referred me to someone. They're coming next week. Grab bars in the bathroom, better lighting, perhaps a first-floor laundry conversion. Small changes that can make a big difference. That's throwing good money after bad, Karen protested. You're spending money to stay in a house you'll eventually have to leave anyway. According to whom? I asked. Dr. Miller says I'm perfectly capable of living independently. For now, Karen said dismissively. But what about in 5 years, 10? If and when I need additional help, George's trust will cover in-home care. Karen stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. You're being stubborn and selfish. Thomas is trying to do what's best for everyone, including you. And you're making it impossible. Is it selfish to want to stay in my own home? I asked. To honor George's wishes for me. George isn't here anymore, Karen snapped. The rest of us need to move forward. I felt a flash of anger sharper than any emotion I'd allowed myself to show since this began. It's been 3 weeks, Karen. 3 weeks since I buried my husband of 47 years. And you're already talking about moving forward with selling the home we built together. She had the grace to look momentarily abashed. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said, rising to my feet. You've made your priorities very clear. Now let me make mine clear. I am staying in this house. I am mentally and physically capable of doing so, and any attempts to suggest otherwise will only damage your relationship with me and potentially with Olivia, who isn't nearly as oblivious as you seem to think. Karen stared at me, clearly not used to such direct confrontation from her mother-in-law. For a moment, I glimpsed uncertainty in her eyes. Then the front door opened again, and Thomas called out, "Hello, Mom! Karen!" Karen stepped back, composing herself just as Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway. One look at our faces told him he'd walked into the middle of something. "What's going on?" he asked wearily. "Your mother and I were just discussing." "Some options," Karen said, her professional mask sliding back into place. "What options?" Thomas asked, looking between us. Before either of us could answer, Olivia appeared on the stairs. "They're arguing about whether Grandma should be forced into a nursing home so you guys can sell her house." The kitchen fell silent. Thomas stood frozen in the doorway, his gaze shifting from Karen to me, then up to Olivia on the stairs. "That's not," Karen began, but Olivia cut her off. "Don't lie, Mom. I heard you on the phone with that real estate agent yesterday. You said the house could go on the market by summer if you played your cards right." Thomas's face paled. "Karen, is that true?" Karen straightened her shoulders. "I was exploring options. That's what responsible adults do." "Behind my back?" Thomas asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. When we agreed to wait, I had never seen my son look at his wife with such disappointment. In that moment, I realized how much Karen's ambition had shaped their marriage, perhaps without Thomas fully recognizing it. I think I said carefully, "We all need to sit down and have an honest conversation. No more schemes. No more whispers. Just truth." Thomas nodded slowly. "You're right, Mom." He pulled out a kitchen chair and sank into it, suddenly looking exhausted. "Olivia, come down here, please." Olivia descended the stairs, her expression a mix of defiance and anxiety. She took the seat beside me, a silent declaration of allegiance. Karen remained standing a moment longer, as if maintaining the higher ground, before finally taking the last chair. I know you think I'm the villain here, Karen began, looking directly at me. But I'm just being practical about a situation none of us asked for. Mom, Olivia interjected. There's practical, and then there's cruel. Olivia, Thomas warned. No, let her speak, I said. Everyone deserves a voice in this conversation. Olivia straightened. Grandma is perfectly capable of living here. She's not sick. She's not confused. She doesn't need to be in a home. You just want the money from selling the house. Karen's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? Olivia challenged. We see how you are with money, Mom. Always talking about upgrading, investing, moving up. But this isn't just a house. It's Grandma's home. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking more like his father than I'd ever noticed before. Karen, we talked about this. We agreed not to pressure Mom. And when exactly was I supposed to bring it up? Karen demanded. When she's 80, 90, after she falls down those stairs and breaks her hip. Stop it, I said firmly. I'm sitting right here. Don't talk about me like I'm not in the room or incapable of understanding. Karen had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm sorry, Margaret, but my concerns are valid. They are, I conceded, which is why I'm taking steps to make this house safer as I age. The modifications Nancy recommended are sensible. I'm getting a medical alert system, and yes, someday I may need more assistance, but that day is not today. And when it comes, there are options beyond selling this house and moving me to a facility. Thomas looked at me with new respect. You've really thought this through. Of course I have. George and I discussed it extensively when he got sick. I folded my hands on the table. Now I understand that you're disappointed about the house, Karen. You saw it as an asset, an inheritance, but it's my home, and George wanted me to stay here as long as I wished. He made that legally clear. Karen's expression tightened. That clause was manipulative. It was protective, I corrected, and necessary apparently. The tension between us stretched hot. Then surprisingly, it was Thomas who broke it. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. Dad was right. I didn't see what was happening. Karen turned to him, betrayal flashing in her eyes. Thomas, no. Karen, this isn't right. He met her gaze steadily. How would you feel if someone decided your home, your life choices weren't valid anymore, if they discussed sending you away as if you weren't capable of having a say? That's different, Karen protested. I'm not 72. And 72 isn't 92, I reminded her. I could live here independently for another decade or more. Olivia, who had been watching the exchange, intently spoke up. And I've been thinking, my offer to live here during college is serious. It would be good for both of us. Thomas looked surprised. You want to live with Grandma instead of the dorms? Why not? Olivia shrugged. Midwest State is close, the commute is easy, and I'd save thousands in housing costs. Plus, I'd be here at night if Grandma needed anything. I hadn't expected Olivia to bring up her offer in front of her parents, but I was touched by her determination to help. Karen looked between her daughter and me, clearly calculating this new development. That could actually work, she admitted reluctantly. At least for a few years. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. If Olivia lived with me, Karen couldn't push the nursing home narrative. And if she waited until Olivia graduated, perhaps the housing market would be even better. I'm not asking for your permission, Mom, Olivia said firmly. I'm telling you my plans. Thomas smiled slightly at his daughter's boldness. It's not a bad idea, and Mom wouldn't be alone in the house. Karen nodded slowly, recognizing defeat for now. Fine, if that's what everyone wants. What I want, I said, looking at each of them in turn, is for this family to heal. George would hate seeing us torn apart like this. Thomas reached across the table for my hand. He would, and I'm sorry we've added to your grief, Mom. Karen didn't apologize. I hadn't expected her to, but something in her posture eased slightly. We should go, she said, standing. Olivia has homework, and Margaret probably needs to rest. Actually, I said, I was hoping Olivia could still help me with George's clothes. It's time to start letting go of some things. Karen hesitated, then nodded. All right, Thomas and I will come back for her later. After they left, Olivia and I spent the afternoon sorting through George's wardrobe. Each shirt, each pair of shoes held memories. I cried sometimes, but it felt cleansing rather than devastating. You know she hasn't given up, Olivia said as we folded a sweater I'd decided to keep. Mom, she's just regrouping. I know, I said. But I'm prepared now, and I have allies. The months that followed brought changes, but not the ones Karen had planned. The home modifications were completed, making the house safer without changing its character. Olivia graduated high school and moved into the second bedroom that fall, bringing youthful energy to the quiet house. Thomas came by more often sometimes, without Karen reconnecting with me in a way we hadn't managed since he was young. Our conversations grew deeper, more honest. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing, George had hung decades ago. He confessed that his marriage was struggling. Dad's letter made me think about a lot of things, he said. About the kind of man I want to be, the kind of example I want to set for Olivia. I squeezed his hand, offering silent support. Karen remained Karen, practical, ambitious, focused on appearance and advancement. But something had shifted in the power dynamic of their relationship. Thomas stood up to her, more especially regarding me. And when she brought up the house again, as I knew she would, he shut the conversation down firmly. Mom stays where she wants to stay, he told her. End of discussion. As for me, I discovered that 72 was not the end, but another beginning. I joined a water aerobics class at the community center, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering at the local library's literacy program. The grief of losing George never fully disappeared, but it softened, making space for new experiences. On the anniversary of George's death, I visited his grave alone, placing fresh flowers against the headstone. You were right, I whispered. I didn't break. I bent, but I didn't break. Walking back to my car, still driving despite Karen's concerns, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. George had given me one final gift, the space and time to discover my own strength, to remember who I was, beyond being someone's wife, someone's mother. I was Margaret Bradley, 73 years old, still living in my own home, still making my own choices, still finding joy in each day. That night, Olivia and I had dinner on the patio, watching fireflies blink in the gathering twilight. Her first year of college had been full of new friends and challenges, but she seemed content with our arrangement. Do you ever regret turning down the dorms? I asked her. She shook her head. Never. This was right for both of us. She smiled mischievously. Plus, it drives Mom crazy, which is a bonus. I laughed, a full, rich sound that filled the evening air. George would have loved hearing it. The battle wasn't over. Of course, Karen would try again someday. But I was no longer afraid. I had found my voice, my strength, my dignity, and I wasn't letting go.